It's easy to think we've never been here before, that the United States of America has never experienced anything like this, like what's happening in Minnesota, that it's always been a place where we can freely walk down our streets and feel safe, not afraid of what might happen. And I know that when I think about it intellectually, that, of course, is not true. There have been many times in our history where people of color have been treated less than human, diminished by white supremacy, subject to violence at the hands of some kind of law enforcement. But one thing I'm struck by right now is how I keep hearing these comparisons to Nazi Germany. I'm sure you've heard them. ICE is the gazpacho. Well, that really took a different tone on that than I intended. ICE is the Gestapo. Let's take a deep breath here. Authentic, not perfect. I'm sure you've heard the comments, whatever it is you'd be doing in Nazi Germany is what you'd be doing now, be it ratting out your neighbors or hiding them. I see these comparisons everywhere. But here's the thing. The Nazis got their system of separating the Jews from the so-called Aryans from us. This was before Auschwitz or the final solution. It was 1934, and they were trying to figure out how to turn their ideology into laws in order to protect their ideology, right? To figure out how they could protect this racial purity that they had and they wanted to have. And the country that they most wished to emulate was the United States, particularly the Jim Crow laws of the US South. The US had laws preventing interracial marriage and banning immigrants based on race. And as the Nazis tried to legitimize their government, they could point to the United States and say, see, they're already doing it there. Hitler himself admired what the United States had done, especially the genocide of the indigenous Americans and the violence against Black people. And particularly the fact that the United States was able to claim a kind of innocence despite all of this. Legal scholar James Q. Whitman wrote, "The United States was not just a country with racism, it was the leading racist jurisdiction, so much so that even Nazi Germany looked to America for inspiration." The research that the Nazis did saw them look to other white supremacist countries like South Africa, but none reached the level of the United States. They were the ultimate white supremacy according to Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany, the country we are afraid we are becoming. And this system of racial segregation, the Jim Crow South, that was what Martin Luther King Jr. was born into in 1929. A Black child in Atlanta, the son of a minister who would change so much and inspire so many and be taken long before his time at the hands of an angry white man. Dr. King's father, a minister himself at the Emmanuel Baptist Church in Atlanta, taught young Martin that the system was unjust. One time, Dr. King remembers going with him to a shoe store as a young child, where they were told they could be served, but they would just go to the back of the store. And Martin Sr. said he would not. He would either get served up there or not get served at all. And so he walked out with his son. And Dr. King remembers that even though his father had been born into this system, he would never adjust to it. As an adult, he would then say these words, "There are some things concerning which we must always be maladjusted. If we are to be people of goodwill, we must never adjust ourselves to racial discrimination and racial segregation. We must never adjust ourselves to religious bigotry. We must never adjust ourselves to economic conditions that take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few. We must never adjust ourselves to the madness of militarism and the self-defeating effects of physical violence. Dr. King knew, in part because of his father, that the world they were living in wasn't right, wasn't just. Sometimes that reminds me of the lessons we teach our children, to help them be the kind of people they are going to have to be in the face of fascism. And that's what Jim Crow was, wasn't it? Really. Fascism, not unlike what we see today. And so as the conflict rages on the streets of Minneapolis, rages between the people and the courts and on social media, remember the people have been here before. Not exactly here, but close. Defiant of the unjust treatment of the government, wondering about larger geopolitical dangers. And there are lessons here. Something I'm struck by this week as I watch everything unfold in Minnesota is that the friends I have there have told me that it's just as scary, just as horrible as it seems, perhaps more so. UU minister Reverend Ashley Horan lives just a block away from where Renee Good was killed. And she can hear the whistles when ICE comes into her community, which is a good thing because people are out patrolling, warning their neighbors about what's happening. The number of federal agents nearing somewhere around 3,000 is dwarfed by the people who are volunteering to help warn their neighbors about them, to help protect each other. But it doesn't change the fact that Reverend Ashley had to talk to her children about what's happened there. The things no kid should ever have to worry about. It makes me think about all these kids, seeing their parents taken away, all the kids at the schools where ICE is there standing during pickup and drop-off, having to miss school because of safety. And then I find myself, this weekend in particular, thinking about Martin Luther King Jr.'s kids, or of him as a child, seeing the way that people were treated differently. And I think maybe it's not so different. Now, it's important to remember that Dr. King was part of a movement that sparked real change, much of it after his death, but a lot of it during his lifetime. His belief in nonviolence, his belief in social change was rooted in nonviolence and civil disobedience. And it was not well received by the mainstream white moderate, as he would call them in his letter from a Birmingham jail at the time. Interestingly, there's actually a quote from the Reverend Dr. Richardson Reed, a former minister here at First Parish in Malden, from a sermon that he gave on Sunday, April 7th, after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s death, where he said, "I did not always agree with the tactics of this great gentleman." A feeling shared by many white clergy at the time. And so now when we talk about him, often his legacy is whitewashed, with so much focus on his idea of nonviolence resistance that there's a lack of understanding of just how disruptive he and those who worked with him were. But people didn't like it. Why can't they just follow the law, they said. And so when I see the pictures of the police, of ICE, and the police attacking protesters in Selma, for example, I can't help but see the ways in which ICE is attacking protesters today. But through it all, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. believed in creating something called the beloved community. The beloved community is a community where everyone is cared for, absent of poverty, of hunger and hatred, where people of diverse backgrounds and identities would be able to live together, not without disagreements, but with ones that can be resolved peacefully. His wife, Coretta Scott King, would refer to this as a realistic vision. We Unitarian Universalists, guided by those in our movement who are leaders in the work for racial justice, have adopted this idea of beloved community in one of our shared values of justice, which includes the words, "We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities," and it's capitalized here because this is what we're referencing, "where all people thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of oppression within individuals' institutions. We are accountable to each other for this work." Now, this beloved community is obviously a wonderful goal, but it's easy to look at what's happening in Minneapolis, but here as well, and feel despair that the beloved community is farther away than ever. But Martin Luther King Jr. was no stranger to hopelessness. Take the Montgomery bus boycott. This boycott that started with Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat to a white person and lasted for over a year. It included Black people from all over Montgomery, Alabama, refusing to take the bus until the law changed. The one that said that the seats at the front were reserved for white people and that the Black people had to give up their seats. This boycott was long and well organized. I'm still amazed when I hear about the meetings that they had to coordinate people all across the city. Included people agreeing to be a driving service so people could get to their jobs all over the city. But as the boycott continued, things got worse. There was violence. Participants faced losing their jobs. Those who were carpooling were arrested on minor or made-up charges. And after this, Martin Luther King Jr., who had spent much of the boycott in a state of optimism that surely it would work out, felt a loss of hope at what might happen. He had a moment where that loss of faith became evident to him. It's referred to as the kitchen table experience. It was around midnight. You can have some strange experiences at midnight, he says. It was January 1956 at the time, and Dr. King had just received another threat. A caller saying, "We are tired of you and your mess now. And if you aren't out of this town in 3 days, we are going to blow your brains out and blow up your house." He said of this experience, "I sat there and thought about my beautiful little daughter who had just been born. She was the darling of my life. I'd come in night after night and see the little gentle smile. And I sat at the table thinking about that little girl, thinking about the fact that she could be taken away from me at any minute. And I discovered then that religion had become real to me. And I had to know God for myself. And I bowed down over that cup of coffee. I will never forget it. I prayed a prayer, and I prayed out loud that night. I said, Lord, I'm down here trying to do what's right. I think I'm right. I think the cause that we represent is right. But Lord, I must confess that I'm awake now. I'm faltering. I'm losing my courage. And I can't let the people see me like this, because if they see me weak and losing my courage, they will begin to get weak." Then it happened. It seemed to me at that moment that I could almost hear an inner voice saying to me, "Martin Luther, stand up for righteousness. Stand up for justice. Stand up for truth. And lo, I will be with you even until the end of the world." And so he continued. Inspired by this message from his God, the conviction that he felt his cause was one of righteousness, and the courage and commitment of all the people involved in the boycott. People who ended up walking miles a day just to get to their job. He continued. They all did. The boycott was expected to last just a few days, but it lasted over a year. Through threats and arrests and outright violence, Dr. Martin Luther King's home was bombed just 3 days after he got this message. His family was okay. But other leaders would have their homes and their churches bombed as well. And then, finally, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the local bus segregation law was unconstitutional, and Martin Luther King rode the first desegregated bus and sat right at the front, a symbol of the work they had done. And of course, there was violent backlash, but the ruling held and the buses remained desegregated, showing that this kind of sustained work has an impact. Now, I hear this story and I am so moved by how long the boycott lasted. I'm struck by the kind of commitment that it took for those people, ordinary people refusing to adjust to how they were being treated, who provided that sustained action to make a difference. When I look at those videos out of Minnesota, I'm struck by one thing. What feels like a level of resistance I haven't seen before to ICE. And it consists of people blowing whistles and causing a disturbance and videotaping what's happening, documenting it for all of us to see. And some of them are being subject to violence, but they are still there. Reverend Ashley Horan says that in Minneapolis, they've had trouble keeping up with the influx of volunteers who want to patrol and do ICE watch. There's a sense that these people that ICE needs to get out of our community. It's not just something that immigrants have to fight. Friends, this might be a long road to resistance. It will thread itself from Minnesota to Boston and back again. And frankly, if things continue as they have beyond this country too. And there will be times when we lose hope. But as Coretta Scott King said, the beloved community is realistic. Like Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. said in our reading today, I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak and peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. We need that kind of stubbornness right now. We have to remember that many have come before us in the struggle for justice and have faced insurmountable odds, and have continued the sustained work against the forces of evil that are white supremacy, that live in the government of this country and always have. It is our responsibility to build that beloved community by refusing to give up hope, by always believing there can be another way, another possibility. We don't know the outcome, but we must believe that the possibility of a different outcome exists. And we have to support the people doing that work and support each other as we settle in for the long haul. And perhaps what's most important is to support those we don't know who are doing the work, to become part of networks of mutual aid, networks of support like Luce here in Boston that aim to support our neighbors. We only have each other to keep each other safe. So let us follow the lessons of our ancestors. Let us prepare for hope, fight for justice, and live with love. Let us never give up on building the beloved community. May it be so. And let us say together, Amen. Amen.